Hello, my darling. It's Maria here. I was drying dishes in the quiet of a Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed on the counter. One simple message from my son, and the floor beneath me seemed to vanish. "Don't come to my wedding. My fiancé doesn't want to see you." That was all it said. No explanation. No kindness. Just the gut punch of rejection I never thought would come from my own child. I stood still with the dish towel clutched to my chest, the warmth from the ceramic plate still lingering in my hands. Outside, the neighborhood kids were playing soccer in the cul-de-sac. Birds chirped. The sun beamed down on a golden fall afternoon, but inside, everything turned cold and hollow. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. My tea had gone cold. My knees trembled just enough to remind me I was no longer the young woman who used to rock that baby boy in the middle of the night. I had raised him through colic, bullies, heartbreak. I had stood by him even when his own father couldn't find the words. And now? Now I was being uninvited to the most important day of his life. Not because he didn't want me there, but because she didn't. I didn't cry right away. No, at first I just stared at the message, rereading it a dozen times. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe it was a joke in poor taste. But no, my son, Peter, didn't do jokes like that. And I knew her, Carla. I had tried. God knows I had tried. But she was always cool with me. Polite but guarded. Distant. Still, I had never expected this. There was no, "I'm sorry, Mom," or "We'll talk soon." Nothing. Just the order. The command. Don't come. I closed the message without replying. Not out of anger, but because I didn't trust myself to speak. Not yet. I walked into the living room, sat in my favorite chair, and stared at the empty spot on the mantel where Peter's baby photo once stood. It had fallen last year, shattered in the move. I hadn't gotten around to replacing the frame. Now I wondered if I should bother. That evening I roasted a chicken I didn't feel like eating and folded laundry I didn't remember washing. My mind ran like a train with no brakes. Every memory of him growing up, every birthday I planned, every moment I stood by him. And now I wasn't good enough to sit in the back row at his wedding? I slept badly that night. Dreams of empty church pews and slammed doors. And in the morning, when I opened my front door to get the newspaper, there it was. A white envelope, hand-delivered. My name written in my son's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a formal wedding invitation, white and gold with their names in scripted letters. But underneath it, in a different font, a small printed note had been added. "This invitation is extended to Mr. and Mrs. Frank Delgado only." Frank is my ex-husband. We divorced 15 years ago. He had barely been in Peter's life until recently. I was being officially, publicly erased. I stood on my porch in my robe, staring at that damn card, while the wind carried the scent of someone else's fireplace down the street. And that's when I knew. I couldn't stay silent forever. But not yet. Not quite yet. I closed the door, and I started planning. The hardest part wasn't being uninvited. It was the silence that followed. Days turned into a week, and Peter didn't call. Not even to ask if I was all right. Not even to explain. I wanted to believe he was caught in the middle. That maybe she had twisted his arm. Maybe he was just trying to keep the peace. But I also knew my son. I had raised him to speak up. I had taught him that loyalty doesn't mean convenience. It means showing up, especially when it's uncomfortable. And yet, here we were. I found myself going through old photo albums, the kind with the sticky pages and plastic covers. There he was, his third birthday, wearing a paper crown. Halloween, dressed as a little lion, his chubby hands clutching my skirt, and prom night, looking awkward and beautiful in his too big suit, with me in the background, straightening his tie. I had been there for everything. So why wasn't I allowed to be there now? The memories didn't comfort me. They made it worse. They reminded me of what I was losing, not just a seat at a wedding, but a piece of myself. One afternoon, I called my sister Elena. "He told me not to come," I whispered. There was a long pause on the other end. "He what?" "Via text. No explanation. Just that she doesn't want to see me." "That little," she hissed through her teeth. "Maria, that boy needs to grow a spine. You don't treat your mother like that. Not after everything." I didn't need outrage. I needed understanding. "I keep thinking maybe it's me," I said. "Maybe I did something without realizing." "Maria," she said gently, "even if you did, you talk to people. You don't exile them." That word stung, but it was the right one. I spent the next few days quiet, almost dazed. I went through my routines: morning tea, a walk to the market, feeding the neighbor's cat while she was away. I smiled at people, made polite conversation, but inside I was unmoored. And then, 3 nights before the wedding, there was a knock at my door. It was Frank, my ex-husband. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. He looked older than I remembered. His gray had spread, and his shoulders slumped more than they used to. But his eyes were sharp, watchful. "Can I come in?" he asked. I opened the door. Wordlessly, he stood in the kitchen, his eyes scanning the room like he was trying to make sense of being back in my world. "I didn't know," he said finally, "about the note, about the text. Peter didn't tell me he'd done that." I studied him. "But you're still going." He nodded. "I thought, if I went, maybe I could soften things, talk to him, maybe bring him back around to his senses." I laughed, not kindly. "You think he listens to you now, after all those years?" Frank winced. "I know I don't have the right to say much, but he's still our son." I turned away. "He's getting married, Frank, and I won't be there." There was a pause, and then he said something I didn't expect. "He's scared of her." I looked at him. "What?" "She's controlling. Has been from the start. He acts tough around her, but I've seen it. He doesn't speak unless she gives the nod. He doesn't argue." A chill passed through me. "I think," Frank added, "he didn't uninvite you to hurt you. I think he's afraid of what she'd do if he didn't comply." That should have made me feel better. But it didn't, because fear might explain it, but it didn't excuse it. "I carried that boy for 9 months, I said, my voice breaking. "I loved him every day of his life. If he's afraid of her now, what's he going to do when she tells him not to let me see my grandchild?" Frank's eyes dropped. He didn't answer. And in the silence between us, I understood something bone deep. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about everything that would come after. I wasn't just being shut out of one day. I was being written out of the future, and I wasn't going to let that happen. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was dark, cold. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat by the window with a blanket draped around my shoulders and watched the streetlights flicker against the pavement. I was thinking of my mother. She had been a sharp woman, strict, proud, never one to beg. When I left home at 20 to marry Frank, she didn't speak to me for 6 months. Said I was making a mistake. She wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't kind. I remember how much that silence hurt, and here I was, 40 years later, about to pass that same silence down to my own child. But not quite the same. No, I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to show up. Just not in the way he expected. I made a decision. I wasn't going to the wedding, not physically, not to be shamed or stared at or sit in the parking lot like a ghost, but I would speak, so I wrote a letter. It took me hours. I rewrote it twice, then again, then a fourth time. Each word had to be sharp but not cruel, honest but not desperate, and above all, it had to be the voice of the woman who had raised him, not the one he thought he could cast aside. I'll tell you what I wrote. I remember it by heart. Peter, I got your message. I won't come, but I need you to understand something. You are my son. You always will be. I was there before Carla knew your name, and I will be here long after whatever storms your marriage faces. You don't have to choose between your mother and your wife, but if you let anyone make that choice for you, you'll carry that weight deeper than you realize. I've held you through every hurt. I've stood by you when it would have been easier to walk away, and even now, I won't abandon you. But I also won't pretend this didn't cut me to the bone. I will not be at your wedding, not because you asked me not to, but because I won't be where I'm not welcome. You know where to find me, and I hope you do, before it's too late. With all the love you've forgotten, Mom, I folded it carefully, slipped it into the envelope that came with the invitation. Then I added one more thing, a photograph. It was us at the lake, the summer he turned 10. He had a crooked smile, one front tooth missing. I had my arm around him, sunburned, laughing, no idea how fast life would turn. I mailed it that afternoon, overnight delivery. He'd get it the day before the wedding. And then I waited. The phone stayed silent. The day of the wedding came. I baked a lemon cake, out of habit more than celebration. I wore my softest sweater, the one Peter had bought me for Christmas 3 years ago. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Around 6 p.m. I lit a candle for him, for who he used to be, for who he might still be, somewhere under all that silence. At 7:13 p.m. my phone buzzed. Not a call, just a message. From Peter. I got your letter. I'm sorry. And then, just beneath it, can I come see you tomorrow? I stared at the screen, hands trembling. I didn't respond right away. I let him sit with the silence for a little while. And when I was ready, I wrote back, yes, bring cake. But I knew he was bringing something else, something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. He showed up the next day at 11:42 in the morning, right as I was trimming the dead leaves off my jade plant. I heard the knock, soft and unsure, like a boy who used to sneak in past curfew. I didn't rush to open the door. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a breath, and opened it calmly. There he stood. Peter, my son, taller than I remembered, though he hadn't grown in years. Dressed in a sharp blue suit, same one he'd probably worn to say, I do. But his face? He looked tired, not hungover, not elated, just worn. And in his hand was a white box from DeLuca's bakery. Lemon cake, just like I asked. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice small. I stepped aside and let him in, not with a hug, not yet. He set the cake on the counter. I poured us both tea. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table like two diplomats at a cold summit. He didn't touch the tea. I read your letter 3 times, he began, eyes low. I didn't know what to say. I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel it, to sit in it, same as I had. I was scared, he said finally. Carla, she said it was her day, that it should be about her, not family drama. And you agreed with her, I said softly. He winced. No, I didn't. But I didn't know how to say no. She gets intense. I raised an eyebrow. Does she hit you? He jerked back, startled. No, God, no. Does she belittle you? Threaten you? He looked down at his hands. She manipulates, makes me feel like if I love anyone else more than her, I'm betraying her. I breathed in, slow and deep. And you let her do that to your mother. His eyes filled then, just like that. Tears. My whole life, you were the one person I could count on. You never left, never gave up. Even when I was a brat, even when Dad disappeared for a while. I swallowed hard. That part still hurt, even after all these years. And when she gave me that ultimatum, he went on, I knew it was wrong. But I convinced myself it was just one day, that I could make it up to you later. But you can't, I said gently. You can apologize. You can show up. But you can't undo it. You told your mother she wasn't welcome. That doesn't go away with cake and tea. He nodded, eyes red. I know. Then he did something I didn't expect. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I want you to have this, he said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a gold locket, my mother's. I'd given it to Peter to hold on to years ago after she passed. He'd planned to give it to his bride one day. I stared at him. Why? I whispered. Because she didn't want it, he said. Said it was old and sad-looking, and because it belongs with someone who values where it came from. That did it. That cracked something open. I reached across the table and took his hand. I don't want your marriage to fail, I said, but I also won't watch you disappear inside it. I don't want that either, he whispered. I think I already have. We sat there, quiet, and then I asked, did anyone notice I wasn't there? He gave a bitter laugh. Aunt Elena stormed out during the reception. Dad tried to give a toast and fumbled it so badly they cut the mic. And Carla, she acted like it was perfect, smiling like nothing happened. I nodded. That's the thing about perfection. It's very good at pretending. He stayed for hours. We talked, really talked, like we hadn't in years, about love, control, memory, guilt, about what kind of man he wanted to be. And as he left, he hugged me, tight. Thank you for not coming, he whispered. If you had, I think I wouldn't have seen it, not until much later, and maybe not at all. I held him for a long moment. You're still my boy, I said into his shoulder, but you need to decide who you are without anyone telling you. He nodded, then walked down the path, locket in his pocket, the sky softening to gold above him. I didn't know what came next for him, but I knew, deep in my bones, it was finally his choice. Of course, my dear, let me take us back in, right where we were, before the final breath, before the last bow. Peter had left with that locket still warm in his pocket, but the house stayed full of his presence for days. I'd find myself looking toward the door at odd times, expecting another knock, another shadow through the glass. He didn't come the next day, or the day after, but 5 days later I got a call. Can we talk? He asked. Of course, I said, keeping my voice calm. He came over in a sweatshirt and jeans, not the suit, not the mask. This time he didn't bring cake. He brought a bag of laundry. Wasn't sure where else to go, he said, his voice like gravel. I left. I blinked. You left her? He nodded slowly. Just for now. Maybe longer. I don't know. I need to be where I can think. And so I made space, not just in the house, but in my heart. The ache was still there, raw and bruised, but underneath it, something softer was beginning to stir. He stayed the night in his old room. The bed creaked just like it used to. I passed by in the hallway and caught a glimpse. Him lying on his side, facing the window, the locket in his hand. That same night, the phone rang. It was Carla. I stared at the screen for a long time before I answered. Hello? Is he there? Her voice was sharp, controlled. He is, I said calmly. He's resting. A long pause. "Tell him I called." "I will." Then, just as she was about to hang up, she said something so unexpected it slid like ice down my spine. "You won, you know." I didn't reply, because that wasn't true. There was no winning here, only surviving. I told Peter about the call the next morning. He looked away, jaw clenched. "She always makes it sound like love is a game," he said. "I didn't see it until I felt how quiet this house is, how safe." And then he did something that took me completely by surprise. He walked into the living room, to the old cabinet where I keep the heirlooms, things that had belonged to his grandparents, things he hadn't touched in years. He opened the drawer, pulled out the family Bible, and inside, tucked between the yellowed pages, was a letter from his father, dated 2007. Peter froze. "What's this?" he asked. I swallowed. I had almost forgotten about it. "Something he wrote before he left the first time," I said. "I never showed you. I didn't think you were ready." Peter sat down slowly. His eyes scanned the words, his lips moving as he read silently. And then his face changed, his brow creased. "Mom," he said, voice hollow, "he didn't leave because of the drinking." I said nothing, because we were at the edge of something deeper now, a truth I had kept locked away for decades, and he had just found the key. He read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and set it on his lap. He didn't speak for a long time. I could see his mind working, trying to rearrange the past in light of something new. That letter, just a few pages of ink and paper, was the crack in the dam. He finally looked at me. He had another family. I nodded once. My hands were folded, steady, but inside me a storm raged. "He was with us, but also not," I said quietly, "always half elsewhere. I didn't know about them for years. He was good at hiding it, slipped between houses, between stories." Peter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on mine. "How long did you know?" "Since just after your 10th birthday. I found a receipt in his jacket, a toy store in Syracuse. The name on the gift receipt wasn't yours." "And you stayed?" That question hit hard. I'd asked myself that one 1,000 times. "Yes," I said. "I stayed. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to keep you whole. You adored him back then. You thought he hung the stars. I didn't want to take that from you." Peter's mouth twisted. "So you let him lie to both of us?" "No," I said firmly now. "I let him try, and when I couldn't anymore, I left. Remember that? You were 16. You thought I was cruel for asking him to leave. You wouldn't talk to me for weeks." He winced. "I thought you were just done, like emotionally drained." "I was," I said, "but not from him, from pretending I didn't know." He sat back, quiet. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for judging you, for not knowing what you carried." "It wasn't yours to carry," I whispered. "But it became mine anyway," he said. "All that silence, it grew inside me. Maybe that's why I fell for Carla. She never let silence in." We sat there, in that wide, aching space where truth lives. Then he asked, "Do I have siblings?" "2, a boy and a girl. They'd be adults now." "Do they know about me?" I hesitated. "I don't know. I never reached out. I thought it would be easier for everyone if we stayed in our separate corners." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I want to meet them." I looked at him. Really looked. "You sure?" "No," he admitted. "But I'm tired of not knowing who I am. I thought being married would fix that. That love would anchor me. But all I did was tie myself to someone who needed to control me, so she wouldn't have to face her own emptiness." He stood up then, walked to the window. The sky outside had gone gray. December creeping in early. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said, "but I know I don't want to go back to how things were." "You won't," I said gently. "That boy's gone. The man who stays now, he'll decide for himself." He turned to me, eyes bright with something like courage. "Then maybe I need to go find him." And with that, he picked up the letter, folded it into his coat pocket. He kissed my forehead on the way out. And as the door closed behind him, I sat in the quiet and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A cautious kind, but real. 2 weeks later, I got a postcard. It was postmarked from upstate New York, a little town near Syracuse. The front was a picture of an old stone bridge covered in snow. On the back, in Peter's handwriting, "I met them. We talked for hours. It was strange and beautiful. I cried. So did they. I'll tell you everything when I get back. Thank you for letting me find this on my own." No return address, no signature, just his name at the bottom. Peter. I pressed that card to my chest and closed my eyes. It hadn't been an easy few months. The wedding, the silence, the letter from Frank. Secrets long buried had clawed their way to the surface. And the worst part? It had all started with a single message. "Don't come to my wedding." He'd sent it thinking it would be the end of a chapter. But instead, it tore the whole story open. He had to lose something to find what he needed. The truth. About me. About his father. About the kind of man he wanted to be. We haven't spoken about Carla since. He told me quietly over coffee that the divorce papers were signed. No drama, no fight, just a release. "I thought I needed her," he said, "but really I was afraid to be alone. I didn't know who I was without someone telling me." "And now?" I asked. He smiled, not wide, not grand, but honest. "Now I'm listening to myself for the first time in years." There's a softness in him now, a quiet strength I hadn't seen since he was a boy, building forts under the kitchen table, telling me he'd protect me from monsters. And in a way, he has, not with swords or shields, but by coming back, by choosing the truth. I know better than to expect life to stay still. People leave, people change. But if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I carry with me as I age into these quieter years, it's this. The hardest part of motherhood isn't letting go. It's waiting to see if they come back. And when they do, you greet them with love, but not silence. You tell the truth. Even when it hurts, you say, "Here I am. I always was." And you mean it.